Good day, everyone. So, a very neglected question that I don't see really being covered in Genshin Impact is how do the developers actually go about balancing the game? In other words, whenever there's like a new unit released, you can look at their talent multipliers and scalings. And the question I have is how do they determine what that number must be? Why, for instance, if you look at Ayaka C6, do you get a 298% charge attack bonus and not 300%? Who decided on that number and not 300%? This is like a fascinating question because it's got quite a lot of like different implications. Now, honestly, I could find really no information on the internet. So if you do know of something, do let me know. But certainly, I can definitely take a bit of a guess. So what I know from Honkai Impact is that the developers sort of, if you look at the beta and so on, have like a counter. So basically, where it says they're on my screen floor 12 chamber 1, they would have a DPS counter as you do damage against an enemy and so on. And I'd imagine that the developers would have something similar for Genshin Impact. I honestly don't think that they just sit with this little stupid spreadsheet and balance the game. They probably actually physically play test it quite rigorously and in many different ways before they sort of finally settle on the numbers. But there's got to be a bit more to the madness. They probably have some sort of calculator or some sort of like metrics that they decide on, and then whoever needs to develop or balance it in the beta probably has a bit of like leeway, like upper and lower bounds, and then depending on how they sort of envisage the playstyle, they probably then balance towards it. I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure how they get to the numbers, but what I do know is that the current method is not really that good in terms of solving the power creep paradox. So what do I mean by this? Well, basically there is this fear, obviously in gacha games and Genshin as well, that newer units could easily power creep old units, and hence it's in people's best interest to save up for the later units instead of getting the units that are going to come out now. So obviously that would not be a good thing for Hoyo. So what Hoyo has done is they've kind of have this situation where a lot of units are viable, and even new units that come out don't necessarily power creep like the old units. I think one of the biggest examples recently is actually Nahida, and quite honestly, ever since her release, all other Dendro units kind of feel like they're not as strong, although that is what you'd canonically expect. But in any case, you have this weird paradox that if you power creep, it's going to lead to undesirable results. If you don't power creep, it's also going to lead to some undesirable results. And from my perspective, this little paradox is very easily solvable if you design your game from the get-go with different end game modes in mind. In other words, if there are different levers and ways for you to look at a unit apart from just single target DPS or single target healing or whatever, and instead you have units that are perhaps more usable in vertical terrain or any other sort of creative game mode that you can sort of think of, well, that is what keeps a game fresh, because in that case you don't necessarily need to power creep. What you need to do is expand the game more and more horizontally while trying to keep everyone reasonably at the same power level. That is the best way to sort of increase the longevity of a game, and obviously to ensure fairness towards all of the units that you bring out. And the other obvious consequence is that the people that purchase from your game or make purchases when they get like new units will feel like it's been a sort of like fair transaction, because you don't need to worry about power creep, you don't need to worry about feature creep. However you curated your game is just as valid as anyone else has, and it's all about you getting value for your purchase, anyone else getting value for their purchase, and that honestly would make an awesome game. But you can't have that unless you've got an end game focused sort of mindset and you then sort of balance around it. And that, in my opinion, is why Genshin will never be balanced properly. Thanks for watching.